Namaste. This is David Hawthorne at astroview.com. Today is the 21st of November, 2014. The following is the Vedic astrology reading for Bill Cosby, based on the 12th of July, 1937, at 12:30 a.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, most of you already know that he's an American actor, comedian, author, television producer, educator, musician, and activist. He starred in a television series called I Spy that started in 1965. He won 3 Emmy Awards during that time. He earned a doctorate in education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1976. He produced and starred in The Cosby Show between 84 and 92. It was the #1 show in America on television from 85 to 88. He's one of 4 brothers. He began his national exposure on television on NBC's The Tonight Show in 1963. That's during his Moon main period and Venus subperiod. He married in January 64, also during Moon Venus. He had 5 children, 4 daughters and a son. His son was killed in January 97. He was actually murdered while he was changing a flat tire on the side of a highway in Los Angeles during Jupiter Mercury. He's had some lawsuits. In 97, he testified that he had made private payments to a woman who had been his lover in Las Vegas in the 70s. She said he was the father of her child, her daughter. He gave her $100,000 to not reveal the affair. But that daughter later tried to extort $40 million from him, so she was sentenced to 26 months in prison. Then there's always been the sexual assault allegations. In fact, back in March 2005, a woman sued him, and then a civil claim, 13 other women came forward with similar allegations. He settled out of court in November 2006, and now there's another list of women who are making similar accusations against him. Okay, using Vedic astrology from India in the sidereal zodiac, which is 23 degrees earlier than tropical zodiac. In other words, in Western astrology, Bill Cosby's sun would be over here in the sign of Cancer. But that's the tropical zodiac. That's where the planets were 2,000 plus years ago. So the tropical zodiac does not take into consideration the wobble of the Earth's axis, known as precession of the equinox. So over these 2,000 plus years, there's been a drift between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac, which is used by astronomers. So on the day of his birth, if you go to an astronomer, a scientist, a mathematician, and ask them to calculate the position of the planets, they would use the sidereal zodiac, not the tropical. So that would move Sun back out of Cancer into Gemini. But under Vedic astrology, it's actually better to read the chart from the ascendant or rising sign. This changes every 2 hours of the day, whereas the Sun will sit in one sign for 30 days, Moon sits in one sign for 2.5 days. So the ascendant or rising sign is much more specific to the individual. In this case, in the first house, we have the 12th sign of the zodiac ascending at 27 degrees, and the 12th sign is Pisces. So this is a Pisces rising sign, which is a water sign, creative, sensitive, intuitive, and family-oriented. For Pisces, we say Mars rules the house of wealth and status, Moon rules the house of education, mind, and children, Mercury rules the house of marriage and relationships, and Jupiter rules the house of professional life. And those are the most important planets for the Pisces rising sign. Now, Saturn in the first house brings a great deal of maturity. Sometimes when Saturn is in the first house, we would consider that a Panch Maha Purush Yoga, one of the 5 great yogas. This one is called Sasha Yoga, which means senior statesperson, leading the masses. So he gives a lot of maturity. He was very known for his dry sense of humor, very, very mature even when he was young. and also gives a very good work ethic, Saturn in the first house. Saturn, by the way, rules his 12th house of Aquarius, which is foreign land, so he can also become very well known internationally. In fact, his first TV series, I Spy, was going to different cultures and different countries. In the second house, we have the first sign Aries, ruled by Mars. So Pisces can be very courageous and very direct with their speech. But Mars rules wealth and status and continuation of family life. Mars is actually down here in the 8th house. We'll talk about that in a minute. In the third house, we have the second sign Taurus. We have Venus and Ketu, K-E-T-U. This is the southern node of the moon. Now Venus, in its own sign of Taurus, in the third house, is good for entertainment, connected with independent entrepreneurial activities. He ended up running some of his own, writing and running and producing some of his own television shows. But this is great for music. He's also involved in music. I think he plays jazz or something. But the point is, this Venus gives a lot of desires for independent projects connected with fine arts, performing arts, healing arts, entertainment, and education. All those were covered. Ketu in the third house says that there's some spiritual lessons to be learned through independent entrepreneurial activities. Fourth house, we have the third sign, Gemini, with Sun in Gemini. Now this Sun is the royal planet, and it's in the fourth house of home life. So he can have royal homes, as it were, wealthy homes. Sun in Gemini, Gemini is considered the twins, so it's duality. It's male, female, two-in-one wholeness. So often when Sun is in Gemini, or a person has a Gemini rising sign, or even Moon in Gemini, there's some duality to that person. There's two sides. One side, very gregarious, helpful, kind, considerate, supportive. The other side can be a little bit tough, a little obstinate, a little stubborn, and to the point where they can be very aggressive. In the fifth house, we have the fourth sign, Cancer, ruled by the royal moon, and Mercury sitting in the fifth house. Mercury is a planet of mind and thinking and communication, literature, education, and it's in the fifth house in the fourth sign of Cancer. And the fifth house is higher education. Mercury actually rules the seventh house of marriage, and it's in the house of higher education. So his wife had a good education as well as Bill Cosby. So Mercury's in the house of mind, and it's connected with the mind and thinking. In the sixth house, we have the fifth sign, Leo. Now Leo's a fire sign, and Moon is our emotional state. So we have Moon and Leo. So sometimes when Moon's in Leo, the person thinks royally, big, expansively, leadership, but they can get very hot emotions. It's called Pitta, fire. In the seventh house, we have the sixth sign, Virgo. So Mercury rules Pisces relationships, partnerships, joint ventures, and marriage. So Mercury is a very important planet for Virgo, for relationships. For Pisces, for relationships. Eighth house, we have the seventh sign, Libra, with Mars sitting here. Now Mars rules this second house of wealth and status, and it's in the house of marital bond and windfalls. We'll come back to this again in a minute. In the ninth house, we have the eighth sign, Scorpio, with Rahu, R-A-H-U, in the ninth house. Now this is the house of father. This is the house of gurus, religion, spiritual journeys, long-distance journeys, and what we call dharma. But Rahu can be some confusion, addictions, phobias, ambition. Sometimes when Rahu is in the ninth house, the person is restless. They do not stop at one thing. And he had tremendous differences in his careers, different projects, different enterprises, which is fine. It keeps him on the go. In the 10th house, we have the ninth sign Sagittarius with Jupiter retrograde at 29 degrees. Now, we don't mind retrograde planets at birth. They don't really mean much. Retrograde only has an impact in the transit charts. So he has Jupiter here in its own sign of Sagittarius. Now, when a planet's in a Kendra in its own sign, it does become a Panch Maha Purush Yoga, one of the 5 great yogas. Panch means 5, Maha means great. So this is one of the 5 great yogas of life. This one's called Hams Yoga, and it's like being a swan gliding across the river. And this is the house of professional life. So he did very well in his professional life. And Jupiter is education and children. And so he got a master's degree. He also got a doctorate in education. And he often connected his career with speaking to younger children and working with younger children and educating them. In the 11th house, we have the 10th sign Capricorn, and 12th house, we have the 11th sign Aquarius. So this is how the planets are generally placed. Now we'll go a little more deeply into this chart and take a look at how the functional nature of these planets, how they're truly operating in this chart. And we'll also cover the timing of events.